Hello and welcome to another video session of geekvale. We're going to talk about the domain and range of a function. Now the prior information that you will be needing throughout the lecture is a good understanding about the function. So if you don't know anything about function, you can check out the video lecture on that. Second thing that you will be needing is a clear picture of real numbers, because we're going to be using a lot of that throughout the lecture. So if you don't have any confusion with that, you can continue with this thing. Okay, so let's get rid of that quickly. First thing first, we're going to talk about the domain of the function. The domain is all the possible values that you can input to the function. By possible, we mean the values that cannot make the function go undefined. Like for if any value, if the function goes undefined, that cannot be the part of the domain of the function. For example, if I have f of x equals to 1 over x minus 1, and at x equals to 1, the function f of 1 will be equals to 1 over 1 minus 1, which will be equals to 1 over 0, and then it will become infinity, undefined. So 1 cannot be a part of the domain of this particular function. Now you must always remember that the domain is always picked from the set of the real numbers, that is the numbers which start from minus infinity and go to the end that we don't know of, that is up till plus infinity. Now let's talk about the second thing, the range. Range is like the output. Range are all the values that we get as the result of domain. Okay, for example, f of x equals to x, then in this function we can also write it down as y equals to x, where x is serving as the domain of this particular function, which can be from minus infinity to plus infinity, as none of these values can make this function undefined. Also for the output y, that will be the range, and since we can input any value, so as a result we will get any value or all the values in the output as well. Let's look into another example of a function. For example, if I have y equals to 1 over x, take away 3, okay, then the domain of this function will be all real numbers except 3. Now why 3? Because f of 3 will be infinite. Similarly, the range of that function, again, the range of that function will be all real numbers except 0. Now why 0? Because if we check the function for different inputs, like 1 over x take away 3, this function, this goes up as the value of x increases. The denominator also increases. For example, if I input x equals to 100,000, this will result in something very big in the denominator, and the whole value will be something really small value. Okay, it will go to a very small value that will be very close to 0 but not exactly equals to 0. So we will get every output except 0. Okay, and let's look at another example. F of x equals to square root of x. Now you know that when it's square root we are working with, you cannot input negative numbers because the square root of negative results in infinity, right? So the domain of that function will be all positive real numbers, and when we say positive, we're going to also include the 0 here as well, okay, and 0 as well. So now the range of this function will also be the similar thing as the domain, because if we are inputting all positive real numbers and 0 as well, we're going to get the same thing in the output as well, because it's just square root of x. Okay, another example will be f of x equals to square root of x minus 3. Okay, expression inside x square root is x, take away 3. X is what shouldn't be negative, and I have to make sure the expression stays positive. Okay, so 3 is my starting point. I cannot have anything in x which should be less than 3, because that's going to result in a negative answer. So we have domain will be all positive real numbers, starting from which number? Now in this case the expression cannot be a negative, so it's starting from 3 plus 3. Okay, and think about the range that we're gonna have. If we start from 3, the first number that we're gonna get is 3 take away 3, 0. Square root of 0 will be 0. Okay, so our range is gonna start from the first number of the input is plus 3, and the first number of the output is gonna be 0. Okay, so the range of this function, the range of that function will be, range is all positive real numbers, okay, or we can say all real numbers, all positive real numbers starting from 0. Now let's look at another example. If I have f of x equals to x squared minus 9. Now I can input both minus or negative or positive values here, and as a result x squared will result in positive answers only. So based on this thing I can say the domain will be all real numbers. I can input every single number here, right? But that's not correct actually. If we look to that expression carefully, we will see that 9 over there as well. That 9 actually is what defines my starting point, right? The expression should be such that the x square will result in 9 exactly, because if it's anything less than 9, the x square, if it's less than 9, it will result in a negative answer, and the square root of negative will become infinity. So we have all real numbers except the numbers bigger than minus 3, that is minus 2, minus 1, 0, and which are less than plus 3, plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, and all the numbers in between them, because we are talking about real numbers over here. That can be infinitely many numbers between 0 and 1. Similarly, the range, let's talk about the range. Since we start from these numbers, minus 3 or plus 3, we're going to go from minus infinity to minus 3 and plus 3 to plus infinity. So we will get all positive real numbers. But wait, the first values from the negative side is minus 3 and from the positive side is plus 3. So plus 3 or minus 3 input here will result in 3 squared 9, and we'll get 0. Let's look at another example. If I have f of x equals to x absolute. Okay, now if you don't know about absolute, you can check out the lecture on that too. Okay, so the domain will be, we can input anything over here, right? Literally anything over here, because there is nothing which can make my function undefined. So all real numbers, all number, every number from minus infinity to plus infinity. So what about the range? Now, as you know that absolute will turn every negative numbers into positive, so I will get only positive real numbers in my output. In my range, I will get only positive real numbers and also 0. Alright, now let's summarize every case that we discussed so far. The first case was about 1 over the expression, take that away, 1 over expression. And that expression defines the values which we can input. For example, if it's only x, we cannot put 0, x take away 1, we cannot input 1. So it tells us about the values of the domain which are not allowed, okay? The second case was about the square root. And in the square root, you cannot put negative numbers. They are not allowed in the square root. Only positive values are allowed, and we will get positive values in the range as well. Third case was about the square root of a starting point. And the starting point defines actually the value from where your domain begins, right? So you have to make sure that the expression inside the square root stays positive. That's what sets the criterion for the domain. And another case was about the square, when we have x squared and the starting point. In this case, we can input both negative and positive in the square, making sure that the expression inside the square root stays positive, okay? And this thing also starts from 0, okay, and goes above, like up till infinity. So the domain, we have to make sure that it stays positive. Be careful with the starting point. The last case that we discussed was about the absolute, okay. In the absolute, you can input both negatives and positive if it's not in the denominator, okay. And for the range, we will get only positive answer. So you can make a combination of these cases. Try to practice different combinations of these cases. And that's about it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook. If you get confused with anything, post that in the comment section. Thank you.